I'm back at it. So I have test driven the ute. I've done about 40, maybe 50 kilometres in it so far, and it's actually the main thing that I was trying to achieve, getting rid of a stumble while it was warming up. It's gone. It's good. It's mint. It's actually driving really, really well. Until you get to about 6,000 RPM. Now, I did talk about, in an earlier video, I talked about the trigger wheel and the flywheel and the clutch and that whole arrangement there, and mentioned that when we tuned this thing, like, not when I tuned it, when it was tuned 5 years ago or whatever, when we built it, it got to about 6,000 RPM. Spaz didn't really want to go any higher than that. That exact same deal's still there, exactly the same. And in fact, it might even be just a couple of RPM lower, a little bit lower than what it was. So that relates to the trigger wheel and the sensor and the ECU, and how well that can pick up what the trigger wheel and the sensor are telling it and all that sort of stuff. People are going to say that well, I mean, it is true. The trigger wheel needs bigger slots in it for it to work right. But that's not because the trigger wheel's wrong or faulty. It's because the ECU can't deal with that. It's like, trying to think of an example. Can't give you a good one. But the factory ECU will run that trigger wheel and sensor quite happily, way past the stock RPM limit. Some aftermarket ECUs, well, they can't deal with it, and that's just the way it is. So I've gone and I've got something on the bench I can show you. Actually, let's hit this button here. Oh, hand in the way. There's a hand in the way. So that's a VK56 DE trigger wheel, or tone wheel, crankshaft sensor wheel, whatever we want to call it today. Actually, and I've even got a sensor. There's a sensor there. This is a sensor from the ute, and you can actually see there's a little mark on that. That does actually, it's so close to that tone wheel when it's mounted in the ute, it actually is just touching it. So you're supposed to have 0.5 millimeter to 1.5 millimeter of air gap. So with it just touching like that, it's interfering by maybe, won't be quite 0.5 millimeter. It's taken a little bit of plastic off. It might be like 1/10 of a millimeter or something like that. And it should still function with a slightly bigger gap than that. So I made, actually it's sitting on the bench over here, I made a shim, a packer. Now that is 2 millimeters thick, and I'll put that onto here, like, you know, underneath that, and put it onto the ute. So we had now 2 millimeters clearance. We should have 0.5 millimeter to 1/2 millimeters. At 2 millimeters, it won't even start, won't go, won't run at all. So that's pretty interesting. A factory computer will run with 3 millimeters gap there, will go. So interesting. So what I'm going to do, everyone's saying these slots too small. We've been there, done that with that black D40 that we put a VK56 in. Everyone argued that the slots were too small. It's not that the slots are too small, it's that the computer isn't good enough to do the job. But what I'm going to do is I've gone down to shop, got myself a file, got the grinder out, created what they call a safe edge. So this edge here, this has got no teethy teeth, so it won't grind anything. And we can put that file on there. It's going to be fun times. And the only reason why I'm doing that is we can do that in situ in the vehicle. Let's get the torch. Here's the torch. Let's go have a look at the vehicle. I tried to take this panel here off, thinking we might be able to get in there. You actually can't, because the ring gear's in the way. And the only other opening on this side is there where the sensor goes in, and there's no way to get a file or a Dremel or anything in there to modify that accurately. Then I thought, why don't we take the starter motor off, Glenn? Look at that, there's our tone wheel right there behind our ring gear. It's a pretty big gap. So I'm going to lower the hoist down, set up my deck chair right there. Something's dripping on the ground there. I need to look. Something just dripped again. What's dripping on the... Oh yeah, I know what all that is. That's stuff that sits inside this front chassis rail that was all spilt while I was putting it all together. Sit my ass down on my deck chair under there. with my file, with my safe edge, the ECU's, just drop the torch, don't worry about that. ECU is set on the falling edge, trailing edge. So we'll put the safe edge on the falling edge. 34 slots. Back down on the ground, running again. Right, so the solution with the file turned out to be not a solution at all. I did a wee test on that trigger wheel to see how hard it was and how long I expected it to take. Didn't seem like it was going to be that bad. Access in the car was not as good as it might have been, so it was difficult to manipulate the file, basically move it backwards and forwards with any guts behind it, so it was just going to take forever. Off down the road, well, I mean, I had to ferret through all my Dremel tools here. This little puppy here, the slotting holes, mainly in wood and plastic and stuff like that. That's 3mm. The slots we had in the ute were about 2.8. These are about 3. Gave that a tickle. It was like, maybe. Had a look through. You can see that little puppy down there. That was about 3. Had a go at that, and I was like, down the road to the tool shed. Some diamond bits. It's not focusing, is it? Anyway, got some diamond bits. That one there is about, it's about, I can't remember. Maybe, what was that, 3.2? What was that? Vernier calipers. Oh yeah, 3.19, 3.2, thereabouts. So that's nearly a 10% increase in width on the slot. So pulled the starter motor out, gave us pretty good access, and just made sure I was holding this in the exact same angle each time, and just went bzzz, and moved the engine around bzzz, onto the next one. Not 100% accurate, perfect, but I think it'll be close enough. And the fact that we've gained quite a distance, actually you can even see it in this one. This one had larger slots, but you can see that that's bigger than that. So it's now giving the computer more time between here and here on each count as it goes round. Something like about 10% more time. So we were at about 6,000 RPM. We want to go to about 6.6. So maybe we've got it this time. I'll see. It's going to be interesting. So it's lunchtime. So I'll have lunch and I'll put this back on the road, go away somewhere out in the countryside and see what happens. Take it up to the rev limiter and see what we've got with it. If it's hitting a rev limiter or if it's hitting a sync issue, trigger issue, and backfiring and all that sort of carry on. If we can get it to, peak power is supposed to be 6.4. If we can go to 6.4 and it's not tripping out, cool. I'm happy with that. We don't need to take it to 7 or anything like that, although I will be interested if I can get it to, say, 6.8, 6.9, something like that, and it's not hitting the limiter, not hitting the trigger issue, then I'll set the limiter at that and be happy. Not that I need to rev it to that anyway, but we're going to get it on the dyno. It'd be nice to see what the actual peak power is and know that we've actually got it and we haven't just run out of revs because of a trigger issue that I should resolve, seeing as I've resolved the location of the injectors. Instead of being way up here, they're now where they should be. So I've done that, so I should do the other thing while I'm at it, right? Otherwise it's still a half-assed job, and I don't want that. It needs to be done properly this time. Alright, so we're out on the side of the road here. It's not in the middle of nowhere really. I can't make too much noise, but I've given it a crack, and there's no change here. We haven't achieved anything. So the M-Tune software is supposed to have a scope system function availability on it. I've loaded these things up, and as far as I can see, I've set it up correctly. That's supposed to be running. The screen's blank, so the scope doesn't work, so that doesn't help us at all to diagnose what's going on. Pretty frustrating. So just doing a firmware update on this Mtron ECU. I haven't had one done in forever since the thing was going, so there's hopefully been some upgrades. Maybe might resolve our issue, maybe. We'll see. We'll get that done. It pays to do this sort of thing anyway before you get it tuned, so get that done. We'll see if the scope then works. If the scope then works, might have some answers or not. Get on with the tune. Maybe I'll have to organise someone to tune it this week, I guess. Had a look at the fuel maps and the ignition maps and that, and it doesn't look like anything there would be causing what we've got, but you never know. So, yeah, anyway. Right, having an awesome time with this. So, firmware update done. Turn the car on. It's idling quite high, so not here, whatever. Check the scope. Scope function's working. However, our throttle now no longer works. Does not work. So that's cool. Broken that now, so now it's not drivable at all. Wicked. Alrighty. What a day. So 8:30 at night now. I did have a couple of hours off. Went and got some Pamol for our sick child. Just on top of things. Yay. Should be alright soon though, just a sore tummy. There's some McDonald's. Yum yum. And I came back out and had another crack at this and sort of had a bit more methodical approach to things. So going through the process, I'm not sure if I've shown it in these videos. I did record it and it is on Facebook. Yeah, I didn't abuse anyone or say Mtron was junk or anything like that. Not very happy with doing a firmware update and suddenly the thing doesn't go. It's a mobile, but it does happen even with Link or anything. You know, it's you're changing lots of code and things go wrong. So you wear that, and they give you a warning. They say it's going to happen, or it could happen. It did happen. It sucks, but whatever. So what it had done, even though you push the buttons and it says it's calibrated the throttle position sensors, it actually hadn't, because one was on holiday, wasn't there anymore. The firmware update had turned off annVolt 2, which is the TPS2, the secondary throttle position. So there's two of them on the throttle, right? So when you put your foot down on the pedal and the throttle motor moves the throttle open, there's two sensors, and they usually, but not always, they usually have one that starts at say 0.1, 0.3 volts, 0.4 volts, something like that down there at the bottom, and the other one will be at 4.9, 4.8, 5 volts, something like that. Got an itchy nose now. And when you jam on the throttle and the motor works, those two sensors will go opposite directions. The voltages will swap over, and that's how the ECU knows that no one's telling lies. If one of those tells a different story, the computer goes, not believing this, something's broken here, and it'll shut the throttle off and you can't drive it. And that's what we had, because it's the calibration system not quite smart enough to realize, hey, I'm only seeing one sensor and I shouldn't tell them that it's calibrated. I should say not calibrated, faulty, broken, go fix it. It shouldn't flash up in green, it should be in red to say your shit ain't going anywhere, man, because it's not right. But never mind, that's all right. So I came back out here and I was like, I could see it was coming up with a sensor error. As soon as you went on to normal position where the throttle should have been working, it came straight away with a sensor error. I thought, well, that's bullshit. The sensors are fine because it was working just prior to the firmware update. So unless we've swapped wires around somehow and we've jammed voltage into something that shouldn't have had it and broke it, could have happened, I guess. So I went through and I went to the runtime values and I figured out which wires were the wires for the pedal position sensors and the throttle position sensor, and I could see they were working there. And then I went back and traced it back through the system and went, well, hang on, how comes it's not seeing it in the drive-by-wire system, but I can see it at actual terminals? And then I realized, went back through even further back to the initial setup of the ECU, where you literally tell it where everything is on the wires, and AN Volt 2 was off. Not needed anymore, apparently. Let's give that sensor a holiday. Just make the vehicle undrivable. Nice one! Firmware update. My bad, I guess, maybe, because they hadn't had a firmware update in like 5 years, or ever. I think we've got a thing going that's never had one. So it would have done that at some point in time, just not this weekend. Doesn't matter. I've got that sorted out. I've turned it on. I calibrated the throttle. The throttle works now. While I was busy mucking around with that, I decided it wasn't even going to start and run at all. Blew a fuse on the ignition circuit somehow. Never ever done that in the 5 years that it's been on the road, but it did it just now. Something to do with the firmware update and sitting here with the key on for a long time and fluffing around trying to figure out the throttle, I think. So I replaced that fuse and kicked in the guts. It started straight away and it's not running properly. It was hunting between 1000 RPM, 2000 RPM, was surging quite a lot. It's quite late at night, so I didn't run it too long. But there'll be just some fine tuning on the throttle, and there's a multitude of torque charts that they've put in the Entron software. I like things simple. You put your foot on the throttle and you want X amount of throttle and on the pedal, sorry, and then the throttle does X amount of throttle. But the Entron software, it's designed with races in mind, and you've literally got to enter the diameter of the throttle, and you got to have a chart based on airflow, and then airflow into torque, and then torque versus the weight of the vehicle and the freaking diameter of the tires and your final drive ratios and wheelbase and all sorts of crap. It goes on forever with lots and lots and lots of charts, and chances are there'd be some numbers in one of those somewhere that's making it not idle properly. So I have to go ferreting through all that guff. It'd be really, really nice if you could just turn it all off. Just click a box on the top right hand corner or something and just go simple version. There's a road car. We don't need this shit going on this one. So not knocking Entron. It's just far over and above what we need for what we're doing with this. But so if I can get on top of that, it'll be drivable again, and I can then use the what's it called again? It's really late at night. I'm tired. The trigger scope. And we can plot the patterns from the triggers, and we can see what's going on, whether it is something to do with that's causing this misfiring up at the top end, whether it's something different. So it's still that to resolve. I've got to make it drivable again before I can even go down that path. So thinking about the slots that I've put in the trigger wheel, don't think it's made any difference at all. I don't think it's changed that in any way, shape or form. We'll have to see. We'll figure it out. All right. Cheers, boy.